A breakneck pace and a lack of transparency, that's what's making COVID-19 spread to hundreds of millions of people in the world's most populous nation. But how deadly will China's virus surge get? Beijing said the virus wave has already passed its peak and that the daily death rate has dropped over 70%. But a new model predicted just the opposite. And locals say caskets are selling out as losses mount in rural China. Will the country see a COVID-19 rebound? Or is the current wave already over? And what's the real situation surrounding China's outbreak? Comment below and tell us what you think. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Don Ma in for Tiffany today. COVID-19 has already ripped through much of China, but how big will the current virus wave get? On Wednesday, Beijing said infections have peaked and are starting to fall, reporting a daily death peak of over 4,000 on January 4th. On the other hand, a forecaster is raising its estimated number of cases and deaths for China's virus wave. UK-based health data firm Affinity added 11,000 deaths a day to its earlier estimates, meaning the new death peak will reach 36,000 on Thursday. Affinity has also changed its prediction about the extent of China's COVID-19 outbreak. It now anticipates one larger and more severe wave compared to earlier expectations of two smaller successive waves. A bigger wave will put more strain on China's healthcare system, which could lead to higher fatalities. The change comes as people across China are traveling for the Lunar New Year, spreading the virus faster in the country's vast rural areas. Authorities reported an over 70% drop in COVID-19 deaths, but new evidence suggests that China's rural regions are experiencing large death rates. According to a BBC report, caskets are selling out in the northern part of China's Shanxi province. Local producers say they haven't had time to stop production in months. Some farmers buying caskets have reported that they sometimes sell out, adding that those in the funeral business were earning a small fortune. In one village, photos have captured fresh earth mount graves along roadsides. A farmer there said COVID-19 is killing people one by one, including 40 locals who recently passed away. He added, quote, "It's been non-stop over the past month." Is Beijing underreporting the full impacts of China's COVID-19 outbreak? The White House weighed in on that during a briefing on Wednesday.
So China's been saying that there's 70,000 COVID deaths in just over a month, up from just a dozen reported earlier this month. Does the U.S. believe that new number by the Chinese government, saying that there's been 70,000?
The Chinese, we have continued to encourage the Chinese to be cooperative with international reviews and studies about COVID, and they have not been fully transparent. And we cannot speak to the veracity of those numbers. We urge China to be fully transparent about what's going on.
A highly anticipated COVID-19 drug from the U.S. coming away empty-handed from sales talks with virus-hit China. Chinese officials say the American firm that makes it was charging too much. But is the Chinese regime really unable to afford it? An expert says the deal isn't so simple.
Holiday spirits for the Lunar New Year are low this year in rural China. Why the black cloud dampening the celebrations? China's most recent COVID-19 wave is expected to accelerate by the holiday migration. Farmers are also struggling to obtain medication as COVID-19 drugs run out in rural areas. That's as China's healthcare body breaks a deal with Pfizer to buy its antiviral COVID-19 drug, Paxlovid, saying it's too expensive. Starting April, the highly effective U.S. treatment won't be covered by public insurance in China. But is Pfizer asking too high a price for Paxlovid? China affairs analyst Qin Peng says it's misleading to blame the situation on Pfizer's pricing.
The talks broke off not because of money, but mainly over political considerations from China.
Qin says, according to an insider source, an offer to sell Paxlovid for around $100 per course was rejected by mainland China. At the same time, the U.S. purchased Paxlovid priced at around $500 per course. Taiwan and Hong Kong bought it for about $700 per course. Qin adds that the total cost to include Paxlovid on national health insurance coverage pales in front of the vast sums China has spent on trying to eliminate COVID-19.
In 2021, China spent 7.5 trillion yuan on healthcare. In part, it was used for nucleic acid testing. So according to Suchao Securities' estimate, covering Paxlovid in big cities will cost 1.7 trillion yuan, which is actually a very small amount of money. When you calculate the financial cost, buying Paxlovid could actually save China a lot of money on medical expenses.
That's as a clinical trial found 90% of high-risk patients treated with Paxlovid are less likely to be hospitalized. Qin says based on the 70% infection rate among China's 1.4 billion people, if 8% or 80 million infected high-risk patients got treated with Paxlovid, China's medical insurance costs could see total savings up to $240 billion. Qin says there's no explanation for not buying the drug from a financial perspective. That is, unless the Chinese regime is trying to avoid paying state pensions to these elderly, high-risk citizens in the future, meaning if they were to die from the virus.
Thus, this negotiation is nothing more than a political gimmick. China has no intention of achieving success in negotiations or eventually making a deal with Pfizer. It's just a show.
He said the Chinese Communist Party prioritizes politics above human lives.
One question the CCP has: if purchasing Paxlovid saved tens of millions of Chinese people, who would deserve the credit?
During the pandemic, the CCP vigorously pushed propaganda, which claimed the U.S. failed in its fight against COVID-19. Qin says for the CCP, if a medication from the U.S., a nation Beijing deems a loser in fighting the pandemic, were to save so many Chinese lives, it would prove a major blow to the Chinese regime's reputation and would shake the foundations of its rule. China balked at buying Paxlovid after demand for the drug surged amid its domestic virus outbreak in December. Just as negotiations with Pfizer broke off, two Chinese-made medications, HIV drug Asvidine and a traditional Chinese medicine, were approved for COVID-19 insurance coverage, but both lack clinical trial data and reportedly come with certain side effects.
Over in Arizona, authorities say they've seized 440 pounds of a certain precursor chemical shipped from China. The compound is often used to manufacture fentanyl, and its discovery may be a sign that producers are now manufacturing the deadly synthetic opioid on American soil. Here's the latest on the investigation.
The powdered chemical was shipped from China and seized by agents Thursday morning from two locations in Tucson. According to the deputy special agent in charge for Homeland Security in the city, it arrived in the U.S. via a series of suspicious packages in recent months.
The packages are being imported from China.
Lamas said the agency launched the probe months ago. He added that it's still unclear who was involved and whether they're part of a local crime group or an international drug organization. If further investigation shows that the chemicals were destined for fentanyl production here in the U.S., the seizure could mark a new model for how it is manufactured, making it more readily available to consumers in the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say 2/3 of the over 100,000 U.S. overdose deaths in 2021 were linked to synthetic opioids like fentanyl.
I consider fentanyl to probably be the most dangerous controlled substance we've ever had to deal with.
50 times more potent than heroin. It was originally developed as a legal drug to treat intense pain from ailments like cancer, but even a tiny dose can be fatal.
What makes it so much more dangerous is because it really doesn't discriminate in terms of economics. It's available to anybody.
That's because it's cheap to produce and buy. As for how it gets into the U.S.,
these criminal organizations know that the emphasis is at the border in terms of Customs and Border Protection, looking for fentanyl. So if there's a way to circumvent what we're normally looking for at the border by importing it in smaller quantities and perhaps producing it domestically in the United States.
In its powder form, fentanyl is often mixed with other drugs like heroin or methamphetamine.
On Friday, Beijing accused the U.S. of what it called discrediting China's anti-drug efforts. Chinese authorities also advised the U.S. to put new measures in place that's to tackle, quote, domestic consumption of the drug. Fentanyl ingredients are largely made in China and shipped to Mexican drug cartels. From there, the compounds are made into fentanyl as well as fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills. In 2018, China restricted the production of two of the most common ingredients for the drug under pressure from the Trump administration. Talks between the U.S. and China about the issue stopped after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August. The Taliban regime in Afghanistan has arrested 5 men, including 2 Chinese nationals. The group is accused of smuggling stones containing lithium from Afghanistan to China. The 2 Chinese are accused of trying to sneak 1,000 tons of stones containing 30% lithium to China via Pakistan with the help of their Afghan accomplices. Local media reports lithium is the main ingredient of lithium-ion batteries, an important component of smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles. China is one of the few countries in the region that maintains close relations with Afghanistan. Without the presence of the U.S. and its Western allies, China has the best chance of advancing its Belt and Road Infrastructure initiative there. A drowning accident in the middle reaches of the Yellow River on Sunday. A strong current washed away over a dozen people near a popular beach when water gushed into the downstream region of the Sanmenxia Dam. Videos on social media show adults and kids playing on a rocky riverbed when the upstream dam suddenly released water, trapping people in the flood. Those near the shores were pulled to safety. One of them said the water rose above 6 feet in 6 minutes. Authorities confirmed 2 deaths. 7 are still missing. Water management in Sanmenxia City denied releasing water from the dam, saying they only carried out a dispatch order from higher-ups. Opening dam floodgates to release excess pressure is a common practice during China's flood season. It's sometimes done without residents' knowledge. This way, authorities are exempt from compensating the residents for any damage caused. Congressman Tiffany is leading an effort to build normal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. That means recognizing the island as a country. He just introduced a bill in Congress that would officially end the One China policy. The U.S. ended diplomatic relations with Taiwan in 1979 under the policy and switched to recognizing the communist regime in mainland China instead. Also based on the policy, China claims the democratic island as its own territory and has vowed to take it over by force if necessary. Taiwan has its own constitution and elected leaders. NTD's Capital Report host Steve Lance sat down with Congressman Tiffany to discuss what makes the bill important.
Congressman Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to join you today, Steve.
Congressman, you're reintroducing a bill to establish normal diplomatic relations between the United States and Taiwan. Tell us, what do normal diplomatic relations actually look like?
Well, it should look like with dozens, if not hundreds, of countries around the world. Taiwan has been put on the same footing since the Carter era as North Korea and other recalcitrant countries like that. Shouldn't they be treated? Taiwan, it's a democratic country. Since 1979, they've expanded their democracy and are truly a peace-loving, free country here on planet Earth, and I think they should be recognized as such.
You know, it's fast. As somebody who's been to both countries, China and Taiwan, the differences are literally palpable. From the flags that they fly to the type of government that they operate. So why do you think we've seen such a playing of words when it comes to recognizing Taiwan?
You know, I'm not sure why. What you said there really harks back to the trip that I made to Taiwan, and I noticed just at times the fear by some government officials towards mainland China. That really struck me. And it's informed me as we've went forward. And to me, this is why we need this bill. And it's good to see it's expanding in terms of the number of co-sponsorships. When we did it a couple years ago, it was me alone. And now this year we're going to have 18 original co-sponsors. And I think it's really, there's more and more people in Congress that are understanding how important Taiwan is and how important that we recognize Taiwan and that we trade with Taiwan.
And do you think that maybe one lesson that we're learning with Ukraine, or an example that we're seeing with Ukraine, the importance for members of Congress and government officials, elected officials, to show their support for Taiwan so that, like you said, when you went there, you don't see the fear and trepidation from Taiwan officials over China?
Support shows strength. When you look at the Ukraine, what were the two things that Vladimir Putin took from 2021? One, America is no longer going to be energy independent under President Biden, and then the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. They saw weakness. It is really important, and that's part of the reason we're introducing this bill, is to show strength, and I think Congress has a key role to play in that.
And speaking of which, Speaker McCarthy announced that he will be making a trip to Taiwan in the coming weeks or months. How important do you think that will be, that trip?
Really good news. You know, in spite of President Biden being really hesitant on this issue, including his foreign policy team, it was good that Speaker Pelosi made the trip to Taiwan. But I'm really heartened to hear that Speaker McCarthy is going to make a trip to Taiwan, and I think this benefits Taiwan, but it also benefits America, and once again it shows strength. And I think Congress really needs to do that, in part because we have this vacuum at this point in the executive branch of showing that America is a strong country, and we need to project that, because sometimes that keeps the bad guys or our adversaries at bay.
Congressman, my last question for you. In Washington, D.C., it's the capital of the country. We also have a lot of think tanks here, and sometimes when you talk to so-called China experts, they'll lecture you as to how we should not upset the Chinese government. How concerning is this?
Well, you have to know who you're talking to out here in Washington, D.C., and find out what their agenda is. And our agenda in our office, and we try to make it clear to any think tanks, any lobbyists, is that we believe the one China policy needs to end, and we believe in a free, democratically run Taiwan, and we should recognize them as such.
Congressman Tom Tiffany, thank you so much.
It's good to join you, Steve.
And that's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. The Chinese Communist Party's influence quietly spreading through the global economy.
We need to put the China issue to the forefront of the vote. We're often voting based on issues like pocketbook issues, which are important. But long term, all of our pocketbooks will be gone if the Chinese Communist Party is allowed to continue to increase its influence and economic power in the United States.
Tiffany Meyer spoke to Anders Core, publisher of the Journal of Political Risk, about what steps are to be taken. The full episode is available on our partner platform Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thank you for watching China in Focus. I'm Don Ma.